Very nice to meet you. Today at WarsawJS, I have an untypical topic for me. Usually, I talk a lot about. I talk about a lot. I talk a lot about tests, etc. But today, I have a presentation about creating something from start till the end. During my 10 years of building apps, I've seen tons of projects show up and later fail. Some of them had technical problems, some of them were just bad ideas, but most failed. Turns out it's hard to create a product. And it's even harder to make it successful. So, what does successful mean? For some, it means that it's used by people and not just your friends. For some, it means even it's successful if it's used only by your friends. For some, it's that it's more popular than you can think of. And for some, obviously, it means that the product is profitable. In my presentation, I'll show you how, together with my wife, who is here at the audience, we've created a web game that was successful, at least for us. It was used by people, so it's cool, not just our friends. I would argue it was even popular, and still is, and it's definitely not profitable. But it made us infinitely more money than we thought it would make us. So exactly $2 up till this day, only for 32 hours of work. So if we calculate it, it's around 3 cents per hour or 30 cents per hour. Not the best rate, but good enough for us. I'll focus on the rules that we've had used to create this application and the common mistakes I, as a CTO of a software house for over 10 years, the most common mistakes people make while creating new applications. So I'll start with the idea part, because what can we start with other than the idea? First of all, if you want to make a project, the idea should be simple. It should be easy to understand for you and for others, and it should be easy to explain for you and for others. The second thing is, for the idea, at least for me, is that it should be executable in 1-2 flows. What do I mean by flow? My flow, for example, is around 4 to 6 hours of undisrupted coding. So essentially, when I work, and I have a block that is from 4 to 6 hours, and no one and nothing breaks this flow, this means that this is one flow. That's the best case scenario. And the quicker you can finish your project, your idea, the better. And the last thing is that the project should be testable. And I'm not saying that it should be testable like automated testing, or you should be able to find bugs. I'm saying that you should be able to measure user engagement for your idea. If you cannot measure user engagement for your idea, you probably cannot improve the idea. And if you cannot improve it, you probably even shouldn't be doing it at the first, for the start. Okay, so for the game we've created, the idea was that it should be simple. So progle is a game that works like LOLDL, but with programming languages. So if you don't know LOLDL is kind of like Wordle. Wordle is a game where you guess a word based on 5 letters. You have 6 tries. Each try you have more hints about where the game what word is you're guessing. So the idea is simple enough so that I can explain it to someone who already played Wordle, and that was our target group, in exactly like 1 sentence or 2 sentences. The second thing is that our project was executable in 1-2 flows. It was estimated for around, estimated time to finish was 8 + 8 hours. So 1-2 flows exactly for me and my wife together. The visual part was about one flow, and the data gathering was the second part, and another 8 hours for the whole logic of the game and the infrastructure. The last thing is that the game should be testable. How many people have answered? We started with the idea of creating a game, so we thought that the best measure for if the game is doing okay is how many people answered and how many people finished the game. Okay, this is a screenshot of Loldul. So essentially, the concept is that if you guess correctly, you get a green box. If you guess incorrectly, a red, and if you're somewhere there, you get yellow. And each and every guess, you get more hints. Okay, so the idea is there. It's simple. And when you've got the idea ready and have a sort of a plan that you want to implement, it's time to execute. We've made the idea very simple, so it's okay for our first priorities. And this is the hard part, the execution part, because you can mess a lot here. And I've seen tons of projects fail during the execution phase. Probably you also have. So for me, the best things that support the execution phase to go smoothly are, first of all, a small team size. The team has to be the smallest possible. And by team, I mean everyone involved. So doing the initial work alone or in a pair is usually the best option. Coordination is extremely hard and time consuming. So I've participated, for example, in tons of hackathons, and unless you have a fully committed team that is willing to spend their lives on the project at the same time, you will not finish the hackathon usually. You might finish with a prototype or a presentation, but that's it. You will not achieve a much better record from the hackathon. So it's better to have a smaller team that with fewer man hours than it is to have a fully and to have it fully coordinated rather than a bigger team. It does not mean that you should not have bigger teams overall, but when starting something completely new, a new idea that you came up with, usually the smaller the better. You have zero bureaucracy, essentially, the fewer the people you have. Here is a tweet by Alexander Wolodarski, and which mentioned around 10 companies with one-person teams. Some of them made around $600 million through their projects in a single person team building IT applications. The second part is that the team should be independent, that the team does not have to coordinate with the outside world. Responsibility is on the team, ownership of implementing the idea is on the team, technical skills required should be also on the team. If you lack any of that, you must introduce coordination. As we've mentioned previously, coordination is time consuming, etc. So waiting for example, for someone to finish something or waiting for a decision to be made, for me, breaks flows. And as I've said, I only have around 1 or 2 flows per day. If a flow is broken, essentially the time after that is usually lost because I cannot get into the top performance level. So the third thing is that the team during execution should focus on shipping. Here is another tweet by Steve from Builder.io that you should focus on shipping, just ship it. The idea is simple. You know how to implement it, and there is no coordination overhead. The last thing that you can screw up is that doing stuff that is unnecessary for the project. So experimenting too much with technologies you don't know. Building anything that is not the core of the idea, or thinking about all the things that you don't need. Here is another tweet. I'm a lot of tweets here in this presentation. But in this tweet, Daniel mentions what things you don't need to launch your project. And at the very bottom is some way to bring attention to your product, because it doesn't matter how much your product, how many hours you've spent, if no one knows about it, you will fail. So the last thing is, don't forget about the essentials. Set up user engagement tests, because we want the application to be testable. Don't make it an afterthought. Think about the functionalities you have with taking into account the user feedback. So in our application, a team of 2, everything done by 2 people. We focus on shipping a lot, and we didn't forget about the essentials. For example, when we focused on shipping during our project development, this game assumes that every day a new challenge approaches. So when we've released the first day, we didn't have the code ready for changing the challenge for the second day. So essentially, we've put a deadline on ourselves by releasing that for the next 6 hours. During the next 6 hours, we must release a idea of how to change the challenges. Otherwise, on the second day, the same challenge will be there. Okay, and here's our execution with a timeline. This is essentially hour 0. This is how we started with the project. I've made a few screenshots. After 2 hours of development, we've had the logic and the simplest front end running. We don't know design, both me and my wife, so it's it looked very bare bone. But after 6 hours, and we've added styling, and comparisons are better. You cannot see it very much here, but the years have hours. There is also yellow showing up. A lot of code has changed. We've added around 10 languages to the database, because here we had only 3, and a lot of things have changed. Oh, and we encrypted the game so that you cannot go to the tab and just see which one is the winning answer. And after 12 hours, so essentially the second day, styling improved, added better select, lots of changes to languages, because we've played the game here and we've noticed that it sucks. So we did a lot of changes, and here is the moment where the first deploy happens in the first release. So after the first release, 2 hours later, we had to handle changing game for the next day. 16 hours after release, we've added PWA plus subscriptions to notifications, and 24 hours after first release, we've added the second game mode. This is how the game looked after that, and it looks very, very similar to how it looks today. So the third part that most people don't think about when building software products, and probably many of you don't touch on a daily basis, is how to get attention to your project. I'm not a marketing expert by any means. I don't know how to do it properly, but I know that this part is the key when building application. It's as important, or even probably, unless, because we're on WarsawJS, we don't want to hear about it, but it might be even more important than the technical aspects sometimes. You can have the best idea, the best execution, etc., but if no one knows about the game, about the project, it's worthless. So when it comes to attention, I have a few rules that I follow when creating a project. First of all, treat users the same you want to be treated as a user. So on the website, do not show, do not try to market your page as a tragic clickbait if you don't like to be clickbaited. Do not pop up for subscriptions or cookies if you don't like. For example, I prefer to not have cookies show up during my internet browsing. So we've used analytics that allow us to track user behavior without tracking specific users, so that we are GDPR compliant, so that there is no cookie pop-up. The second thing is publish on social media channels that you personally use, not only social media, but media channels that you use. Don't be afraid to say to everyone about the project you've made, even if it's at the phase that you did it for 6 hours. Publish whenever. Uh, don't wait for publishing when you're ready. Do it ASAP. So essentially, I came up with the idea of the game. I wrote about the idea of the game even before the idea was finished. Even before there's 6 hours during development, I wrote about it so that I can get first traction to the game, first hashtags on Twitter, etc. were already there before the game was released. And the last thing is add, share, subscribe before you release, because the first wave of users will be essentially non-converted. So share, subscribe should be very high on the priority list, even if it's not the core of your business, because you need conversions. Okay, here is a graph of the first day. Here is the release date of the project. We had around 2,000 users. This is the first week of the project, of how it went. 5K unique visitors visited the page, and you can see that the visit duration was around 3 minutes. So it wasn't bots, etc. People were just visiting the game, and they were even playing. We had 2.8K unique games won in the first week, 3.3K total. So essentially, around 500 people won the game more than once. And the most popular languages. It's funny because we gather data about what languages people are trying to guess, and it's very similar to distribution of developers. So you can see that the most developers are usually in Python, JavaScript, Java. People wrote on Twitter, because the first day it was Java, that that they answered in the first attempt, because usually in the first attempt, because they tried their language first. Okay, the part 4 is feedback. First, communicate with users, and all new ideas should somehow correspond to user feedback. Some languages were not filled up correctly in our database, for example, and you wouldn't believe it, people wrote to me on LinkedIn. A person wrote to me on LinkedIn and said, you know what, every day during my stand-up when I'm bored, I play the game, but I'm very unhappy that this language is incorrectly in the database. And he wrote me a 3-paragraph summary about the history of the language and why it cannot be phrased in this way in our database. So it's we got a lot of feedback about users. One guy even created a podcast about the game, an episode of a podcast about the game. So it was the feedback from the user was much greater than we've expected. And many things that we've changed was because of the users. The second thing is, you are a user. If you go to a project with an approach that you don't know design, or you don't know UX, or you're not the best at this or that, think about, I usually try to do things that I use also, or I want to use also. So I am also a user of the application. I have feedback about the application, and I can do stuff about it. So just embrace it. And if you want to change something, just change it. No one will have a problem if it's a good change. Third thing, check the engagement with your ideas. After adding a second mode, the second mode was an idea of one of the users. So we've added a second mode. We've moved it to the top, and it was probably much better than the first one, at least at that point in time. And we've noticed that no one plays the second one. If this better one is at the top, then no one will even bother to play this worse one. So we had to switch it back because we needed more engagement from the users, and we've improved the first mode a lot thanks to that. Okay, The last part is monetization. And when it comes to monetization, you've saw the title of $2 for this application. I'm not the best person to present about it. This project was a thing we wanted to do for a long time. It reached our success goal of someone playing it once even, and we never thought anyone would play it regularly like me and my wife did with Loldl. So one time I've donated to Pimeko, who is the creator of Loldl.net, $2. 3 minutes left. 3 minutes left. It's a platform where someone can just buy. I've donated to him on coffee, which is a platform where you can buy a virtual coffee. And while doing that, I thought that maybe I can also put it on our website. So I did. I've created a coffee link on our website, progle.net, and after a week, someone decided that they wanted to buy us a coffee. And after setting up Stripe, etc., and taking their provisions, we got €1.50 or $2 donation from coffee from the user that really liked our application. So I gave him a very big thank you. Since then, every day we fill in new challenges, at least for that person. So I think that it's the best investment that he had in his lifetime. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Bravo. I wasn't sure if you saw my signal.
Yeah, I saw.
I was like all over the place.
Yeah, I saw.
Does anyone have any questions for Michał?
Hi, what did you use like as a technology behind the scenes, and where did you publish the game?
The game is published, and the technologies used are very, very simple. I've skipped this because I've noticed I'm not on time. But as the I've used Astro, which is not the best choice. I would use Next.js now. And the honest answer is we've created a very, very, very simple backend service that just sends the quiz for every day. It's also in Astro as a API page, similar to a Next.js API page. The whole game is a client-side game. We've used PWA, so essentially you can play the game offline because that was also a request for a feature. And the games are stored. I mean, I've changed it last week because it got cumbersome, but the games are stored as JSON files on the server. So every day I go into the app, I create a new challenge, and I commit and push, and that's all. I'll publish I will open source the game soon, but we wanted to keep it secret still because the challenges were in plain text in the repository. So yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm just curious why you didn't like using Astro for this project.
Oh, it wasn't ready yet. I mean, we did it. It was when we started, it was the first week of Astro 2.0. So essentially everything was not working because of the big switch from Astro 1 to Astro 2 and a lot of breaking changes. So it's cool. Probably now works better. I don't know. From that time, I've just bumped the version and no breaking changes showed up, so that's cool. But it did a job. So yeah.
Good answer. Anyone else have any questions for Michał? We go.
One more.
What?
Jeez, cool.
So, what tool did you use for the user analytics?
Okay, this is a cool one. I've used a tool called Plausible. It's an alternative to Google Analytics or other analytics. I wrote a blog post once about self-hosting because the whole page was hosted on my Raspberry Pi in my home. It's also hosted. It was part of the marketing campaign and it worked. Anyway, so I self-host a analytics solution called Plausible. It's very cool. It has the basic features required for analytics, at least for me. And I gotta say, because I also use it on my blog, that I've never had so much fun looking at numbers the way I have when looking at numbers through Plausible Analytics. I guess it could be their slogan. Yeah, but plausible.io, I think. Very, very cool tool.
Good reference.
Yeah.
You should be paid for that slogan.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions for Michał? I think it was a very engaging.
If any of you will have questions later, I'll be sticking
during the
around.
networking,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I'll be
Because you
sticking
guys,
around.
yeah, you're aware that we're having a networking session afterward. Everybody give Michał a great hand because, as always, a fantastic presentation. We thank you very much. We thank you very much.